Hey everyone, I'm Tim.
And I'm the only Luddite in the OSINT world, Chris.
And welcome to the OSINT Output.
Did you enjoy that countdown, Chris?
It's I saw it this time. I know last time I didn't see it because it was like real tiny at the bottom of the screen.
We're gonna have to get you some glasses every
It-
single time we pull this up.
No, man. Like we'll just make it up and you'll just go, hey, we've started, and I'll have not known that until we got there.
All right, we have a guest on here that Chris reached out to.
I'm really excited to talk to this person, mostly because of their field, and they just seem like a nice and pleasant person. Tim and I have talked about how important psychology is when doing open source investigations and psychological preparedness. So I was able to find and reach out to a very knowledgeable expert, and that is Dr. Lisa Orchard, who I believe you got your doctorate from the University of Wolverhampton.
That's
And
correct,
you
yes.
currently work for, I think, QAHE Limited. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, thank you. It's really nice to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about, who you are, what you do, how you got into cyber psychology, and let's talk about the basics of cyber psychology.
Sure. Okay. Well, hi everybody. So I am an academic, a cyber psychology researcher based in Birmingham, England. And I have been researching cyber psychology for over 15 years now. So cyber psychology, it's a very niche field, and usually when I tell people I work in cyber psychology, I get lots of blank faces of people not knowing what that means.
That was
But
me when Chris told
yeah.
me about that. It was like cyber psychology, or tell me more, brother. He's like, don't worry, we're going to have a guest do that for us.
Well, I promise it is a real thing. I'm not making it up. But cyber psychology is essentially we're looking at the psychology of how human beings interact with and within digital technologies and environments. So we are looking at things like why people are drawn to technology, why they make use of technological features, what the outcome of that is. You know, if you think about psychology generally, psychology aims to understand what makes humans tick, like what makes them behave in the way they do, think and feel the way they do. And so we're doing all of that, but we're just introducing that digital technology element. So how does technology affect that? You know, how does that come into play, and how does that change our behaviors and what we already know about how we behave and think?
Excellent. So one of the things that we did want to ask was, you're a member of the British Psychological Society. Is that like UK wide? Is it based in England? What do they specialize in? It's just all fields of psychology, or
No, yeah, so it's a UK based it's our kind of governing body of psychologists. I think the US version is the APA. But it's essentially they keep us guided on our toes. So they do all the policy regulations of how a psychologist should act. But the cyber psychology section is fairly new to that. So I think that was started in 2018. And I've been a part of it since then, which I'm really pleased to be there from the start. So I sit on the committee, the cyber psychology committee, and we're basically looking at the ways we can get cyber psychology more well known, looking at how we can network researchers in the field and other psychologists in this field to get a better understanding of how cyber psychology fits into things like policies and how we can get the word out there. So I've been a secretary up until now, and then we've had two wonderful chairs come before me. So we've had Dr. Linda Kay and Dr. Dawn Brandy Bell. And from this summer, I will be taking over as chair alongside my lovely colleague, Dr. Dave Harley. So yeah, it's pretty fun. We get together a few times a year and just talk about the best ways we can move cyber psychology forward.
well, congratulations on being chair now. That's
Yeah,
excellent.
on that
Thank you.
promotion. Like,
Yeah.
I like to say, we'll take credit for that since you've been on this show. You've been
Oh,
promoted.
of
So.
course. Yeah, it's totally to that.
Along with that, what are some of the like journals and publications that are out there that are pushing cyber psychology forwards? Like, where can we find these studies so we can do our own reading, I guess, or consumption?
Yeah. So if anyone's interested in learning more about cyber psychology, if they Google BPS cyber psychology, that should take you to our British Psychological Society's microsite. So we keep a lot of the resources on there and things like courses that you can learn about cyberpsychology and things like that. But in terms of journals, there's a journal called Cyberpsychology, Behavior and Social Networking. That was one of the first in the area. And there's also a journal called Computers in Human Behavior. That's another cool one. So there's so many now. It used to be really, really niche, but there's so many that even if they don't talk about cyberpsychology specifically, the psychology of why we use technology is so important that it kind of gets brought into anything where we're talking about technologies.
Before we dive too deep in that, Chris always
Oh, yeah.
he always comes up with at least one weird sports trivia thing, and this time he found out where was it from? What?
Okay, so you were a lecturer at the University of Wolverhampton,
Yes,
and
I
I was
was.
looking at the university and their sports because I'm a big sports nerd. And I came across two sports that I didn't recognize just from the name, and I refused to look into them because I knew we were going to talk to you. And it was futsal and netball. Do you- what are
Yeah.
those? Do you know anything about them? Are you tapped into the sports scene over there?
I'm probably the worst person in the world you can ask about sports. But netball, I did play netball very, very briefly when I was
Oh
at
yes,
school.
we have an
So
expert. We have an expert.
it's essentially a basketball, tends to be played by women. But you're throwing the ball rather than kind of dribbling it. But that is like the worst description of netball ever.
No, that's perfect. That's all I needed. I
So
needed to picture it. So it's basketball with running but no dribbling. So you're just tossing the ball back and forth.
yeah. As far as I can remember, I haven't played it in years. There may be some dribbling, I don't know, but it's basically get the ball in the hoop, but
Is
a
it the
different
same
kind of pace to
size?
basketball.
Is it the same size as the
It's,
basketball?
I believe so, or maybe just a tiny bit smaller. I believe
Okay.
so, but yeah, I could be
What was the
wrong.
other
I'll probably
one?
have like angry netball fans on me now, but yeah.
Are there angry netball fans out there?
I
Because
don't
I want
know.
to meet them. I
You walk
really,
into a
Yeah.
pub and everybody's wearing the jerseys.
I want to get harassed by netball fans. I think that'd be great.
So we always try to do a little bit of background research, as you've seen on our guests. Not so much as like cyber stalking, but just try to ask insightful questions for them. But one of the quotes that Chris found was from one of your articles, and apologies, I can't quote it right now, but one of the things that you posed to the reader was, why do we believe fake news and how do we stop it? So
Mhm.
what's kind of your take on that? Why do people believe fake news, and what are some things that we could probably either some cognitive biases we could eliminate, some process we could put into place on the editing side to help stop that?
I think there's a number of reasons, really. A lot of the time it's because we're distracted and we're busy, and so we see things and we don't think through the content as critically as we perhaps should because we're kind of looking for an easy way out. So we see news and we may just kind of process it because it's too much effort to try and critically think about it. But I mean, there's different biases that come into play generally. So something called a confirmation bias is when we see things that agrees with our opinion, so we're more likely to trust it kind of as it is. So if you, I don't know, if you believe in a particular political party and then you see fake news that supports that party, you're more likely to believe it because it supports your opinion, right? It's just like an easy shortcut to
Yeah.
say, oh, look, here's some evidence that says I'm right. So I'm going to quickly absorb that and put that in my pocket. There's also like lots of visual clues around there. So, the number of shares, the number of reactions, the number of comments, the more kind of traction news gets, the more likely that we think, or maybe there's something to this because people are kind of engaging with it. And especially when like the person who shared it with you. So my husband, for instance, he's the most skeptical guy in the world. Like he will literally fact-base something to death before he shares it. So if he shares something, I'm more likely to just think, oh, that's going to be true, right? But
Yeah.
he could make a mistake and share that. So there's these little clues that we see and kind of take notice of. But yeah, there are a lot of psychological biases in place as well.
And I have a quick follow up for that because you mentioned like engagement on the platform where it kind of reinforces your belief in that. and this is actually one of Chris's things as well, because I love asking his questions so I can take away content away from him.
Yep.
But LinkedIn has a thumbs up button, Facebook has a like, and Blue Sky has a heart. They all essentially mean that you're engaging with it, reacting in a certain way. But do you feel because they're essentially different symbols, those subtle changes can affect interactions over time?
So yeah, I don't know about the research on this specifically, but I imagine a lot of the time the reaction is just I kind of have some kind of emotional attachment to this material. I think it's just a kind of a click of a button that people click. I think if it's materials like more personal material between friends, then the type of reaction may kind of play more into it. But yeah, I don't know if people kind of really see it in terms of different things. I think it's just a standard kind of reaction now.
Because
But
there is a lot of research that goes into UX and UI design and keeping a person engaged. So they probably were like, hey, you know what? A heart would look more attractive and differentiate us from this and not attract a different type of crowd as well.
I'll say that I'm more hesitant to click a heart than a thumbs up, because I feel like a heart is like I'm now committed to whatever this is, versus just like, hey, that's cool. I read what you said and I think it makes sense.
So you are wearing a Grinch shirt at this podcast as well. So I think that's a subtle nod that you have no heart. So
No, that's fair. That's fair. I will add one thing on the fake news. Is I think it's important that we understand that fake news is not just news that you disagree with, because like a lot of people will see something, they'll disagree with it, and they'll just dismiss it as fake news.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that that is a key problem, and you know, I think people aren't very good at debating online. Just generally, there is like this dismissal of anything that doesn't fall into our opinion. So there is this reluctance to get into debates because you don't want to get sucked into the toxicity of whatever the internet throws at you sometimes. But equally, there is this kind of yeah, we just believe what we see, and then we take things on board, and like you say, dismiss things that don't fit into that bubble of how we'd like the world to look.
So next, I'd like to ask you, because like you've been a lecturer and you were a senior researcher, and I think your current role requires a fair amount of research as well. So what's one lesson that you've learned in your cyber psychology journey that you think everyone should learn at some point? So like, yeah, what's one thing that we can tell everybody that they can then apply to their life in the digital world?
Wow, okay. That's a lot of pressure for one question. But
feel free
I
to talk
think
it out.
well, I guess there's this thing, right, in psychology that the more you know, the more you learn, the more you realize that you don't know. So you kind of have this
Good one.
ignorant bliss around you that you think, you know, you have a strong opinion and you think, oh, that's what the opinion is. You know, I'm right in that opinion. But actually, the more you do the research to it, the more questions you get and the more factors it unlocks towards that. So nothing is ever black and white. So I guess the lesson would be to keep on keep on questioning yourself, keep on looking for the evidence to support your ideas, because sometimes we do fall into this fake bliss of not realizing how complicated our lives can be, you know, around us. So.
And yeah, and this is one of the things that Chris does, because he always goes towards those alternative platforms or alternative views that would present evidence of the contrary as well. And I think sometimes it's important to accept that dissent in our lives, because if you always go into an echo chamber, it can result in these falsities as well, and you believe. So yeah, I believe that 100%. Always find information.
I mean, so I tend to get stuck in rabbit holes where I'll read one thing and I'll be like, all right, oh, I got to go down this to figure out all that stuff. And I'm pretty sure that methodology has just been endorsed by our cyber psychologist. Is yeah, just go down rabbit holes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I've spent many an hour down conspiracy theory rabbit holes and all kinds of things. And you know, that rabbit hole can be entertaining sometimes, but it is just, it's about opening your eyes and, like I say, you know, just making it okay to learn and to learn new things and to change your opinions based on what you do learn and what you find. So that's what being a researcher is. We're just looking for breadcrumbs that leads us to the place we need to be. But we may go in several different paths before we get there.
That's got to be our tagline: is breadcrumbs take us to the place where we need to be.
Mm-hmm.
That's very true for OSINT investigators as well.
Yeah, you always want to go where the information kind of leads you, rather than going where you think the information should lead you. Of course, looking at hopefully sources that are authoritative, which is what you always want to look for, but understanding information can take you. So, Chris, you don't have any social media really.
No, I don't.
But you did want to ask her about.
Yeah. So I noticed in some of our research into you, one, you focus a lot on social media as far as your cyber psychology research. So in addition to that, like, what are your favorite social media sites? What do you use? What do you do on these things?
And also, it doesn't have to be just personal. It can also be, anything that you find useful for the community as well to kind of go down and look towards. But we'd love to know, personally and professionally, what your favorite platforms may be.
Well, you see, I'm a bit biased. So I'm a millennial, so I'm kind of partial towards Facebook because, that started out when we first had social media and there was this massive switch onto what social media was. But also, I did my entire PhD on Facebook. So I spent 4 years just looking at Facebook and looking at why we use it, what we're doing on there, what we're getting from it. So yeah, I feel like I have to root for Facebook after spending all that time on the site. But I'm a really big social media user personally. I use Instagram, I use Facebook, I use Pinterest and YouTube, and like just anything that's going, I'll give it a go. Yeah, I find it fascinating to see things play out, even if it's not me posting things, just kind of watching the psychology happen in front of my eyes. So I will give lots of different sites a go, but I guess Facebook for me is the one that has my heart.
How do you feel about Zuckerberg's decision to remove the content moderation team, and well, not completely remove them, but focus more on community moderation? How do you feel about that decision?
So I'm not going to profess that I'm like an expert on the behind the scenes stuff, but I do think that platform owners generally need to take more ownership of investing in the protection of people. So I feel like more needs to be done in terms of protecting the users of such sites. And yeah, I don't know whether I want to say it's a bad decision, but it worries me that there isn't more research or more money going into how we can protect users on social media, for sure.
One of the things that I got heavily into was dark web research over the last 3 years, until I changed jobs to Shadow Dragon, because I was at CATI Dark Blue and now I'm with Shadow Dragon. But it does really start affecting me from a research perspective. Just as a little side note about me, I was on 4chan a lot looking at the UK protests, and I was reading all these things and it altered the way I was talking. So my wife looked at me one day and went like, "Hey, can you stop acting like that? You're really upsetting me." And I was like, "I'm sorry, what did I say?" And she quoted me and I was like, "I am so sorry. Like, I did not mean it for it to come out like that at all."
So I think with social media, like you have to think about how you're using it, right? So you can't use it without putting thought into whether you're getting benefit from it. So for me, I'm quite light-hearted in the way I use it, I guess. I use it for just talking to my family and friends, and I use it for kind of looking up arts and crafts and things, which is my hobby. So I use it in quite a light touch manner, I guess. But it's really important that people are reflective and making sure that they're getting out of social media what they want from it, and they're not just kind of falling into the trap of using it in a negative way.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it's easy to fall into that trap. Like, and I think at some point we all have in some way allowed that to affect us in a negative light. And I mean, if you're on there enough and you see enough negative stuff, it's real easy to bring that into the real world. So we definitely got to work on how we protect ourselves, I think, from that aspect.
Yeah, I think like I've kind of on Facebook you can click when you see scams and things like that and try and get the content removed. And I've done that and had it come back to say that content's fine, they're not going to remove it, when it was clearly like a scam. Clearly, there's like, fake celebrities and things, and the Facebook report comes back and says, oh no, they're fine to pretend to be this person, and it's obviously trying to scam people. So yeah, I think the platform owners do need to be a lot more on the ball of protecting their users from the negativity and things.
Do you believe they should be held liable for content that appears on their platform as well?
Oh, I don't know much about law to be able to say one way or the other. I think they should have procedures in place. It's hard to say be liable because, how does that then work with, I think there has to be kind of individual accountability to that. Yeah. So we can't just say,
Yeah.
oh, the technology has made me a bad person. The technology has done this. I wouldn't have done it unless the technology. I'm kind of really hesitant to fall into that way of thinking, in that the individual ultimately has control over what they do with, the things that they use. So yeah, I don't know about being liable as such, but it definitely needs to have procedures in place where they are being more cautious.
And the only reason why I bring it up is because, like, I'm a huge fan of Black Mirror. I don't know
Mm.
if you watch it at all, but one of the episodes, it was Smithereens, actually went down that, was like, what if a content creator wasn't liable for this, and then an individual took it upon themselves to try to do something? And I won't ruin the story for any listeners, but Black Mirror is an excellent series that gets into stuff like that as well.
All right. Yeah. So well, did you need to respond to that, or you?
Oh no, I was gonna say I love Black Mirror as well. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's a great show for cyberpsychology thinking. So yeah. Sorry,
Oh.
but carry on.
No, that's great. I wanted you to get that out. You seemed really excited, so I
Oh,
didn't
I
want to
love
cut you off
Black
there.
Mirror. Yeah, it's a great like Nosedive is my favorite. So
Oh, yes.
yeah, like the social media one. Yeah, I don't want to spoil it too much, but basically being rated and how ratings on social media can then affect how you stand in the real world. And the first time you watch it, you think, oh, this is crazy, but actually you see how much of it's happening in the real world already. Like, do you get Uber over there, like the taxi
Yeah.
company? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like the Uber company, the Uber drivers can rate you and give you a rating out of 5, and so you get this social status of how good a passenger you were. And yeah, like as a lecturer, there's websites that rate me like lecturers out there. So how good's my professor? How good's my lecturer? So yeah, we're rating each other all the time online. So it's not so so distant to what you actually think it would be.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, even our podcast too, like the sites that we're on, it gets rated as well. And it's truly a weird phenomenon as we've gone from, the industrial age to the information age to now, I guess, the consumption age, and even beyond that. It's crazy how we as a society as a progress. But yeah.
All right. So I think we got one more question about social media, but it's a complicated one. So because this is one of your fields of expertise and where you got your doctorate, what do you think is next for social media? From like, how do you think it'll evolve with the user base? And then, like, what would you want the future of social media to do? Like, in addition to just give you, fun things to watch from a cyber psychologist standpoint.
Obviously, the nosedive episode from
Yeah. We need more ratings, right? We need more public ratings.
We need more cat videos. That's what we need from social media. More cat videos.
I agree with that.
So, yeah, it's a hard. So there's this theory called niche theory, and it suggests that social media and any kind of media is only really successful if it offers something new to what we had before, right? So we had Facebook, and then Twitter came along with the limited characters, and then Instagram came along with photos, and TikTok came along with videos. So it's like you have to have this unique selling point to make it that people want to uptake it. So thinking about where we are, I'm not sure I'm creative enough to think of what else we could possibly do with that. But in terms of where I'd like it to go, I'd really like the platforms to think more about accessibility for users. So, I'm a mom, I've got 2 young kids. They're not on social media yet, but my eldest will be, in the next few years. And it would be good to have the kind of settings really easy to change. So things like, I don't want this person to see that at a click of a button, or I don't want people contacting me at a click of a button. And I know those settings are in there, but they're hidden away so deep that a lot of people don't know they're there, or they're unaware what those settings do. So, being really accessible and user friendly, and have it kind of really clear what you're signing up to, because no one's going to read the terms and conditions, no matter how many times we get T&Cs come up of anything. We haven't got the time, we haven't got the legal knowledge to understand that. So yeah, being really kind of accessible and clear about what you're agreeing to, I'd really like to see that.
There's an excellent resource out there for a lot of popular websites. It's called tosdr.org. It's mainly means terms of service didn't read, and they go through and read the terms of services for websites like Amazon or Wikipedia or YouTube, and they give it a letter grade how well it not only provides content that may be valuable for you based on what the terms of services are, but also rates it on privacy as well. And you're probably wondering, like, well, who's doing this rating? Is it like somebody in their basement? They say it's journalists, investigators, and attorneys that are giving it that rating. So something, if you ever wanted to check it out, just for our listeners, would be useful to look at.
Yeah.
That sounds good. I've not heard of that. I will check that out myself.
And then I'll add along with what you're talking about, as like I'm a father of 2 teenagers, and they're on social media. And while sometimes I don't get the parental controls correctly, because they are sometimes difficult to find or to understand exactly what you're filtering, what I choose to do more of instead is we'll look at what they've been going through together, and then we'll talk about stuff that they have questions on, or some things that I go, "Oh, that's questionable. So let's figure out what we know about this before I just give away all the good information."
Active parenting is crucial.
All right. So we wanted to talk a little bit about online behavior, and I think this stems from one of the papers you were a co-author on, the online behavior taxonomy, the conceptual framework to understand behavior in a computer-mediated communication. I think I got that title correct. I was also reading it, so hopefully I can read and get it correct. So we wanted to talk about that, but first let's just kind of talk about like what the purpose of that was before we ask some of the more specifics.
Sure. That was such a fun paper because it was completely organic. So, the British Psychological Society, our cyberpsychology section, we sometimes hold like socials, and we had a social where we were just kind of talking about what is online behavior. And as cyberpsychology researchers, you see it all the time, people talking about online behavior. But actually, when we sat down as like a group of researchers to talk, and we were saying, you know what, it's quite hard to narrow that down because it's so diverse what you can do on the internet. It used to be back when we first got the internet, we would literally look at websites and maybe send emails, and that was our online behavior. Now there is just so many different things we can do, and so we decided, we got together and just kind of talked it through as a bunch of researchers what we think online behavior looks like. And we sort of kind of landed on this idea, well, how close is that behavior to what we do in our everyday behaviors? So we narrowed it down to 3 types. And the first is online exclusive, which would be behaviors that you can only do online. So that would be searching Google, or buying something from a website. There is online mediated, which is when you're doing something that's very, very similar to offline, but the technology gets in the way. So just like talking to you at the moment, we can see each other, but the technology's got a slight barrier to that, so it's not quite as kind of fluent as it would be if we were in the same room, right? And then there's the online recorded, which is when we are just carrying about our day, but then bits of technology is recording us. So that could be your home assistant in the house, or it could be your smartwatch recording your heartbeat and things. So it's like there's different types of data, and we was suggesting that maybe our behavior changes depending on which type of online behavior we have. So if it's online exclusive, maybe we're more removed from our kind of everyday self than if it's like the online recorded behavior. That makes sense.
To piggyback off of that, because one of the things that Chris and I look at all the time, especially in our jobs, is understanding misinformation, disinformation, and which are the authoritative sources we could be listening to. So that's where that kind of trollish behavior comes in, where like you're a separate individual you are online than you are in everyday life. Do you feel like there's an element of our psychology that truly goes towards that sometimes? Like, I'm going to be more honest online than I would in everyday life.
Yeah, I mean, there's a researcher called John Suler, and he coined what we call the online disinhibition effect. And he was suggesting that when we're online, we can kind of lose our inhibitions, and so that would result in either kind of toxicity, like the trolling behaviors, or what he would call more benign behaviors, like disclosing more and being more altruistic to others. So that, yeah, there's a lot of reasoning behind that in terms of lots of different factors that the computer or the technology promotes that make us a little bit more a little bit less tied to our inhibitions. It's not really tested as such, but my personal opinion on that is that perceived consequences is really important. So this idea that when we're online, if you have trolls and things like that, they maybe see the perceived consequences as falling into their side. So they get a lot of enjoyment out of trolling and they don't see the consequence away from that. Okay. But for some other people, they may say, yes, it could be enjoying, it might bring enjoyment to troll, but they may see the upset it cause or worry about losing their job because of it. And so they're then changing their behavior because they're more aware of those perceived consequences. So yeah, there's lots of different suggestions on factors that can affect that.
And I would think the more anonymous the platform is, the more people probably engage in disinhibition, where they can talk about things they normally wouldn't. Because I know me myself, right? I use my name on Facebook. I use it on LinkedIn. So I'm more likely to post things I believe in that wouldn't affect me in my professional life. But if I go on something like 4chan or a dark web forum, I'm more likely to engage in conversations I wouldn't normally on other mediums.
Yeah, absolutely. So anonymity was one of Sula's kind of main factors towards it, towards disinhibition, this idea that if we are separated from our identity a little bit, then we kind of lose that hold on who we are and we're more likely to reflect kind of newer behaviors. So the research on that is varied depending on context. So sometimes for bloggers, we find that if they have got their photo on their blog and their actual name, they're more likely to disclose more because they're shaping that brand of who they are. They're shaping that kind of that persona. But anonymity is a really big one.
What are some of the ways that we can prepare ourselves psychologically for the digital environment? That way we don't get, too far in that rabbit hole. We don't get too much in that echo chamber, and then that manifests into our everyday life.
I think so what you said earlier about, talking to your kids about what's happening online, I think that's so important in terms of teaching skills of how to use the online world. So, I say to my kids, I'll never ever be angry at you if you come and tell me something bad's happened online.
Yeah.
I'd rather you, I promise you I will never shout at you if you've made a mistake or if you've done something, you must always come and tell me. And I think opening the conversation is, I'm not claiming to be a perfect parent by any means, but opening that conversation is a way of learning. And, it's kind of, there's a researcher called Sonia Livingston who does some really fantastic work on children online. But she talks about how there are online harms and online risks, but you've got to be able to kind of learn from your mistakes. You've got to be able to see how the online world works and kind of test those boundaries in a safe way. So I think just opening conversations up with your children so that they will be better prepared as they grow up is important. But for ourselves, maybe being reflective on what you're doing online. So a lot of people, spend a long time on the internet, on social media,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't like that. When they reflect on that, they don't like that they're wasting that time. So, maybe kind of be cautious and reflect on what you're doing online, and kind of taking that stock check of, are you happy with the way that your online behavior is going?
One of the courses I always teach is understanding your mental health when conducting online investigations. So what do you think are some of the indicators an individual may present where they may be being online too much, or they're looking at a topic that's affecting them in such a way they don't realize it yet? Because I know there's various terms like, compartmentalization, taking away from and understanding it's a job, but what are some of the indicators that someone may want to take a step back from social media or technology as a whole?
Um, so sometimes the people around you are really good information sources for that. So like your family and friends, if they show their concerns, like you said earlier about your partner saying that they don't like how you're acting when you've read certain stuff online. So if you're getting kind of feedback from those around you that something's happening, you're changing your behavior, you're investing a lot of time in this, and that's a good kind of indicator to take a stop and check. Um, and I think it's not just about time online. So, a lot of people game for hours and hours on end, right? Doesn't mean that that's a bad. I'm not pointing any fingers here. I'm not
I am. It's Tim.
making
It's Tim.
So, but I mean, we don't really see that as a bad thing compared to other forms of kind of technology use over time. So it's about thinking, what is it that's happening on the site? What am I doing, and how is that making me feel? So if you're playing for games and hours and hours and hours, but it's making you happy, and it's you're socializing with your friends, then I don't really see an issue with that. But if you're finding that you're neglecting things in your life, you don't want to go to work anymore, you don't want to socialize anymore, then those are the things that maybe there's something you can work on.
Specifically for OSINT practitioners, because that's something we heavily focus on the show, people conducting open source intelligence. How valuable do you think it is for them to either engage with a cyber psychologist or just a therapist or a psychiatrist to try to understand maybe things they don't realize yet and how it's affected them? How important would you think it would be in the field of OSINT for people to go through these therapeutic practices?
Yeah, I mean, mental health is so important anyway. So speaking about things that you may encounter, I have a colleague of mine who's done some research on violent content online and the effects that that can have, and it can, really get to you. So yeah, definitely, I feel like people need to reach out and talk about these things, even if they don't feel like it's affecting them at the time. Sometimes these things stay at the back of your mind, and it could be that you kind of consciously gone out to find that information, like you're looking into it, or it could be that you've kind of come across it incidentally and you didn't realize you were going to see it. And that can be something as simple as a video that pops up on your Twitter that you wasn't prepared for. So, I definitely say that people need to be taking care of their mental health.
Oh, one of the things I experienced when I was looking at the Islamic State in 2013, 2014, and 2015 was there were hackers that were going out there and defacing ISIS's web pages with photos of pornography, sometimes underage pornography. And that was, well, child sex abuse material, because when I say the term pornography when children are involved, it kind of legitimizes the act. So I never like saying it that way. But child sexual abuse material. And that was one thing that hit me. And like I became hyper vigilant. It was insane, like over time, how I just wanted to go after these guys and remove them because, you know, it's,
Yeah.
yeah, even though it wasn't a direct result of what I was looking for. When that CSAM content came up, I'd started heavily focusing on how can I remove these guys from the environment.
Mhm. It's about, yeah, and like you say, there's that reflection of how it's affecting you, and you know, it's not a case of kind of walking away from the screen because life still exists. Those things are still out there, but you need to take care of yourself and kind of find strategies to help yourself with how to cope with things like that.
Oh, quick question about Chris over here. Lisa, have you ever heard of the term Luddite?
No, should I have?
Well, Chris is going to give you a fantastic
Oh,
explanation here.
yeah. I didn't know I was going to get into that, but yeah. So I'm a Luddite, which actually originates from your side of the pond, and there are people that hate technology and technological advancements and machines because they're taking our
Mhm.
jobs. Which is, I mean, it's an oversimplification of the Luddite movement, or Luddite, I think is the way it's pronounced in other circles. But yeah, I'm definitely one of them. Which is, I think, a good juxtaposition for the job that I have doing open source investigations. But it makes me really suspicious of what's going on the internet. And it also encourages me. And one of the tools that I use for that preparedness is I'll set a timer. Like if I know I'm going after some dark stuff, I'll put a timer on, and when that timer goes up, I was like, all right, I get to get up and walk away for a half hour, look at some green grass or something that makes my eyes happy before then I go back into that stuff because I need that separation.
Starting a podcast
That's
with a Luddite.
yeah, I hadn't heard that term, but yeah, I would say my dad falls into that category. My dad hates
Yes.
all technology to the point like my computer kind of corrupted a few months ago, and he was just had about an hour rant about how I shouldn't trust computers and that's why I should do everything by hand. And it's
He's
just
right.
not.
I have a notebook for everything. Like,
Whenever we're planning for our podcast, we'll set up like a Google Doc or some other way to communicate, even just email. And this dude's like, "Don't worry, I'll have a notebook when we show up." And I'm like, "Well, brother, I gotta prepare it too. So can
So
you
now,
share those with me ahead of time?"
yeah. So now I type stuff from my notebook into the interwebs and I send it to Tim.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like you said about kind of growing out and seeing the green grass and things. Like, you know, there are friendly parts of the internet you can look at too if you do want to look at the internet. So, thinking about, just take Instagram for an example. Who are you following on Instagram? What kind of hashtags are you following? Are you following people that make you upset, or are you following things that bring you joy? And so, my Instagram is full of kind of knitting and crochet and sewing because that's the things that bring me joy. And so, yeah, you can try and use technology in a more positive way as well. So it doesn't have to be that you leave the technology, but I completely appreciate your point of view that you want to leave the technology, and that is fine.
Specifically thinking about the good parts of the internet, right? And the good things you can find to improve your life. What are some resources that people can probably use in their everyday lives if they see this content all the time and it's really upsetting them? What are some resources? Should it maybe be a doctor? Are there online resources they can go to? Because here in the States, we have a number called 988 that we can dial if we have severe mental health trauma in our
Yeah,
lives.
acute issues that you would
Yeah,
need to talk out.
yeah, it's a suicide hotline, is what we call it. Are there other resources either in the UK or in the rest of the world that you know about our listeners could probably use?
I don't, I'm afraid. I know, like we have in the UK, we have dedicated mental health charities. So Mind comes to mind strangely. The charity Mind have a support line and things just for any kind of mental health issue. Um, but yeah, I'm pretty sure there will be kind of different types of support out there. But yeah, it's kind of one of those things you don't really want to search on Google if you're trying to stay off Google to,
Yeah,
to
no,
find what the
yeah.
answer is. But
Especially with the way their AI is working right now, because I think they heavily incorporated Reddit into training
Oh,
some of their
that
AI data. So
that reminds me of a question I had before we get to like our last two questions. How do you think AI is affecting like the social media landscape?
so I'm going to win you over here because I'm very skeptical of AI. I'm
Yes.
very, yeah, it terrifies me to no end. Not only the moral side of it, stealing content from
Mhm.
artists and things like that, but just we're not ready for it in terms of the policies and the way that we behave online. We're not ready for the consequences of what it can do, in my personal opinion, of course. I think we need to, as a society, we need to learn what AI can do. People who are more tech savvy are going to be aware that the picture with the person with three hands is going to be generated by AI, right? But some people will not be aware of that and they will be more kind of, believing that these things are real. Um, I'm not saying I never use AI. I think AI can be a really good tool, but I just feel like we need to be careful of how it's spreading and how it's being used and what why do we want it for? So
Mhm.
you know, on LinkedIn there's a lot of, oh, we can change your post by using AI, right, and rewrite your post and stuff. And I just think, why? Why can't we not just hear people's voices? Why do we need to have it as a perfect kind of selling pitch? Why can we not just have it as, this is the individual? And yes, they might have some typos, and yes, they might have been able to phrase it a little bit differently, but that's what makes us human and different. But yeah,
I,
that is my personal opinion more than anything.
and I gotta echo your sentiments as well when it comes to AI. We develop technology to improve our lives, not take things away that we could probably use in our lives. Like for example, if I do want to look at a very beautiful masterpiece, or I want to listen to a song, right? I would like to see the human doing that. But now there are LLMs out there that are building those. And speaking about engagement as well, when it comes to online circles, I read a really interesting tweet the other day that's been passed around on several of social medias. It's like there's this. I think it was a woman. It was a picture of a woman, and it says people out here being crazy because they only have 12 Twitch viewers. Like, you must be insane. If I had 12 people watching me play video games growing up, I would have loved that. What are your thoughts on engagement and how we're looking for these hundreds of followers, millions of views, stuff like that?
Yeah, I think so. We all like to be validated, right? We all like people to enjoy who we are and make us feel like, you know, they value who we are. So I can see why people chase those high numbers of likes. But the higher numbers, they're unattainable for a lot of people unless you're trading. I was gonna say trading your soul. That's a bit dramatic, but if you're willing, you know, it takes a lot of effort of continual hours, continual thinking, strategic thinking. And the people who, you know, these top influencers are very clever people and very good at what they do. But there's a big trade-off in terms of, you know, the level of trolls that are going to come at you and the level of toxicity you're going to receive. And I think it's not just as simple as that high number. You know, my kids, like I said, I've got an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, and they want to be YouTubers. They want to
Yeah.
have the other people watch them. You know, my 8-year-old is obsessed with Minecraft, and he keeps saying, "Oh, can you record me and I'll put it on YouTube?" And you know, I love his enthusiasm, but you know, you have to kind of think, what do you want to get out of it? Unless you're using it as a way to get money, does it really matter how many people are watching you? As you know, if to me, yeah, I kind of agree. If there's 10 people watching you and they're sharing it and you're enjoying what you're doing, then that's great. That's 10 people in your social circle. But there's a lot of trade-off that comes with getting those higher circles, I think.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating, and I will say, see, Tim, like, not only will I watch you on Twitch, but I'll watch you in the room as well.
That's true. He did that when we were streaming one day. Oh, we're gonna try to do more of those in the future. But now we just wanted to. We have, I think, a couple of final questions. I think one follow up that we're going to do based on your response here, and then a final question that I just have to ask. But is there anything you would like to just say about cyber psychology in general? It can be anything you want to talk about, anything that you'd like to promote. Is there a current study where you're looking for participants? Is there a lecture you're possibly going to be giving in the future? Like anything just to promote the field and yourself?
So we have a conference actually. The British Psychological Society have a cyber psychology conference in July. I believe it's the 9th and 10th of July. And you can buy tickets at the moment. You don't have to be a BPS member. So yeah, if anyone wants to come to that, you're very welcome to purchase a ticket. Yeah, cyber psychology it's just so broad. Like, I tend to focus on the social side of it. Like I said, you know, social media is a big thing for me. I also do some kind of health research. So I've been looking at the way that we can use social media to be more positive when it comes to things like breastfeeding support for women. Like, how can we make sure we're getting rid of some of the toxicity around breastfeeding online and promoting the more positive side of things? But you know, it's just so varied. It can be anything from kind of the cybersecurity angle to gaming to the social side to the developmental side. It really is. There's something for everyone.
Love that. Yeah, breastfeeding was something that I was going to ask you about because I was just looking at
Mm.
your article. Do you feel that there is I assume there is because you just said it, the toxicity around breastfeeding, like, is it heavy on social media a lot, or is it like maybe people are trying to promote it more on social media?
Yeah, so in the UK, we have some of the worst breastfeeding rates globally. We have a lot of people trying to breastfeed when the baby's first born, and that goes, really shoots down after 6 weeks. Um, and there is, it's very mixed bag out there. So there are some fantastic breastfeeding resources and support groups online. But if you get a photo of a woman breastfeeding, it depends what channel you're on. You can either be bombarded with amazing, empowering comments like, this woman's great, look at her feeding a child, like, that's amazing, this is Mother Nature, etc., etc. Or it could be very sexualized and kind of negative comments on that picture. So there's lots of kind of points of debate around breastfeeding. So I mean, the World Health Organization suggests that people should breastfeed for 2 years and beyond. And so actually the average age of breastfeeding in globally is between the ages of 2 and 7 years. That's very much really unheard of in the UK. I think probably in the US
Yeah,
it's quite unheard of.
You said average is 2 to 7 years for breastfeeding?
That's right. That's
Ooh.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know the term milk teeth in the US, but in the UK we say that the first set of baby teeth is the milk teeth. And so actually breastfeeding coincides with when we lose our milk teeth because we lose the ability to latch. So yeah, from an evolutionary point of view, we breastfeed for much longer than we do. But when you see kind of older babies online, not many people kind of like seeing that content. So there's a lot of negativity of breastfeeding, and I think it's about thinking what kind of story we're telling about breastfeeding to people. If you've got a teenager who has never thought about breastfeeding before, and they're coming across pictures of people breastfeeding with comments such as, this is disgusting, why are we seeing this should be hidden, how is that shaping the mindset of who they are and what their bodies are for? So yeah.
There have been movements out there just for women and, your natural anatomy. There was a hashtag free the nip I saw one time where it's like okay for a man to walk around without his shirt on, but for a woman, like it's viewed as kind of a stigma, if you will, for a lot of cultures out there. But yeah, great topic. My wife would love to meet you. She is a great advocate of people breastfeeding. And she's just always, she's from California, and they have a much more liberal mindset than the rest of the United States thanks to their policies. But our final question, okay, and Chris really wanted me to ask you this because
I've heard you, like, I've listened to a lot of your talks and you've mentioned this previously in some of your interviews as well. So then I got really excited because Tim's a big fan.
So I love watching Doctor Who. Unfortunately, I've missed the last 3 Doctors. I haven't followed them as quite closely, but are you a villain from Doctor Who, or would you want to be a villain from Doctor Who, or maybe even a companion? Not to be too negative.
Yeah, I was gonna say, why am I a villain? Like, what have I done to to get the bad title? I would love to be a doctor. Why can't I be a doctor? Let's just say aim high there.
You can.
I can be
She
a doctor.
is a doctor.
It's much more competitive for sure. But yeah. So Doctor Who, I absolutely love that. But what are we on, the 19th Doctor, I believe? Well, David Tennant came back around as the Doctor.
Yeah. I've lost track, to be honest. I mean, I dip in and out of it. I haven't seen the latest series either, but I was a big fan of Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor, so I'm all for female power.
She was on Graham Norton's show, like after she got cast as the lead, as a doctor, and she was told a story where she was on the tube. She was going down there. She had like a cap on, and she thought somebody recognized her, and she was holding out a cup, so she had it down. And she's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm so embarrassed." Right? She's going to come back to me a question, but he put like 1p in there because she thought she was begging. And she let the fame get to her head. And like I always think about that whenever they mention her. But Chris, anything else for Dr. Richard?
No, I don't have anything. Like I mean, thank you so much for coming and talking about this. Like this is, again, this is something that like I guess psychology in general is something that Tim and I are very passionate about, and we know that I think the OSINT community doesn't talk about as much. And then when we came across the term cyberpsychology, like I got really excited. I was like, this is exactly what we're looking for and what we what we want to engage an expert with. So thank you so much for being a part of this. I really enjoyed this. And I enjoyed all the prep work that I got to do. Like I got to read all of your stuff and I got to read some associated stuff. And then I got to just fill Tim's head with cyber psychology terms and I'll use the word nonsense even though it's not nonsense. It's studies and
Rabbit holes you like to
yeah,
go
some
down.
rabbit holes.
And I'm going to echo it too. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on our podcast and sharing your journey and everything you're doing right now, and especially all your research. It's really, really valuable.
Oh, thank you. It's been so much fun. Thank you for having me.
Alrighty. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening. Please comment, subscribe if you like our content. Reach out to us on our website at theosintoutput.com. I'll make sure that Dr. Orchard's socials are linked in the description if you'd like to reach out to her to get some of her publications. And one of the things I will say as an OSINT practitioner, try not to pay for things. And I'm sure Dr. Orchard would be more than happy to send you her publications if you would like to have those. So thank you so much for listening. This is the OSINT Output with Chris and Tim.
Tim and Chris and Dr. Lisa Orchard.
Thank you.